I wanted to start episode 6 here by asking, what do you do that most damages your records? We're both fastidious. We both try to take care of our record collections, but nonetheless, we are human beings. Things happen. We live in places. What do you actually do that you think most damages your records?
I can answer this with 100% honesty because I just did this last night when I was recording the playthrough for one of the records we're going to show later that you'll see in this video. As I was dropping the needle down, I just thought, you know what? Instead of using the little lever to lower the needle, I'm like, I'm fine. I've done this a million times. I can drop this needle. Yeah, I dropped the needle. All right.
Oh no.
I dropped it, it bounced, it scratched, and I'm just like going, oh God, my record. Oh God. Yeah, it was bad. It was really luckily I don't think it damaged the record, but it was really bad. So yeah.
I could count the record drops I've done, and I've stepped on a record as already discussed, and I've scratched, I think, 3 or 4 records. I personally know 3 or 4 records that I was there when I fumbled a record. It was too slick, maybe, and it just fell out of my hands. Drop, scratch. And there was a time, too, where I skated across a needle across, and it left a mark. And that's painful, but that's pretty rare. When you think about how many decades I've been listening versus how many times I've actually done it, I don't think that most damages my records because I don't do it often enough. For me, I think what I most do is actually use these open-ended top vinyl covers. I'm starting to switch to a sealed top. And the reason is because this does get loose over time. It sits in a row open to the dust and crap. The dust and crap kind of wedges its way in there. And even if you try to keep it in good shape, it just over years causes ring wear and other problems. So I am in the process. I bought like a 200 pack of sealed outers, and I'm in the same way I'm swapping all my records out to make sure that they've got rice paper inners. I'm also swapping them all out for tops after all these years, and I think it's going to be better long-term for my collection.
I've started to, like, I don't use the closed ones that you have to open because, I don't know, they just annoy me. But what I've been starting to do is slowly, and I haven't done all of my collection yet. I'm just, as I pull them out to do something with them, like listen or get them ready for the show or whatever, I'm starting to put mine in sideways. So the opening to the vinyl is not standing up. So I still have to pull them out of the sleeve to get them out. You just can't pull them. I kind of like it to where you can just go and pull them out. But I've been doing that just because of the dust thing, because I watched a couple YouTube videos and people were talking about you really need to think about how you do that because that dust can get down in there. And I'm like, I never thought about that.
It absolutely does. And I don't have a good immediate, but I'm swapping over, like I say, to these top sealed ones. And for me, that also offers a top layer of protection because as much as I would like to think I don't put stuff on top of my records, I put stuff on top of my records all the time.
I had caught myself
I'm going to be honest with myself. I do it all the time because where else am I going to put stuff?
Like I consciously don't do it, but I have caught myself doing it. I'm like, nope, don't do that. And I've also caught myself too, like when I pulled like a bunch of records out to do something, instead of making sure they're all standing up, I laid them flat on the floor. And then like 10 minutes later, I walked by and I'm like, oh God, those are flat. Those are all just like crushing each other. What am I doing with my life? So yeah.
The other thing that could be equal is the spritzing of the water and cleaner. I get pretty lazy about keeping it off the center record label. And like I'll wipe it down if I see a big puddle or something, but I think over the years of cleaning my records frequently, I've damaged probably more than enough labels. Would probably be my number 2 or maybe even my number 1 if I did a survey.
See, that's something I've never done. I can honestly say I've never actually got water on this center label, but did it like bubble the label up, or how do you know that you damaged it? I mean, can you?
When a new record is real new, you can usually see the nice super sheen kind of sheet.
Hmm.
It's real
Right.
flat, and then yeah, it gets either a little bubbly or rough. It kind of gets a rougher
Okay.
texture, and I think that
Gotcha.
that's largely just due to kind of little leftover water and rubbing alcohol and everything else sort of kind of working its way
Right.
in there. So speaking of working its way in there, we're going to just about wrap up surfactant talk, and this probably won't even, this will get its short segment here, but it's going to get a longer one in the record basement, which is that I want to answer a question once and for all: how damaging this stuff is to your record. So, because I've got a big bottle of X100 surfactant that I'm never going to use the whole thing of before it goes bad,
Right.
I went to the store recently, as you saw in the record basement Wicked, my visit to Wicked Grooves.
Hmm.
I bought a
Yep.
cheap bloopers record for this
Nice.
purpose in part. Um, what I'm going to do, depending how quickly it dissolves, I haven't decided yet because I haven't seen it in action, how quickly it dissolves to nothing. My goal is to keep a spot of X100 surfactant on a singular section of this record for something like a week
Okay.
and just not clean it. And then
And
after a
just not
week,
clean it, not
just after a
not
week,
mess with it.
yep, do a before and after on the sound, see if it'll even play,
Okay.
or if it does absolutely nothing. And we'll find out one way or
Which,
another.
yeah, I'm gonna say right now, I'm gonna guess it's gonna do absolutely nothing. I don't think it's gonna damage it, but we'll see. It's gonna be interesting to see
Yeah,
what will happen.
yeah. I think that's my hypothesis as well, is that any damage would
Yeah.
take decades rather than even a
Oh
week
yeah,
to do.
that's what I think too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I don't think just leaving it on there a week is gonna do anything. You're gonna have to, like you said, leave it on there years and years and decades, and by then it's gonna evaporate, and then even I think even down in the grooves, if it would get down in the grooves, it's gonna evaporate after a while anyway. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah,
We'll
we'll
see.
find out.
I'm excited to see the results of
Well,
this actually.
because right now because I was talking about the damaging of the record centers, the labels on the records over time with
Right.
cleaning. It almost all my records, now that you actually start looking, you see it all over the place in my collection. It's not super bad, but it is there, and I caused it probably by just sort of spritzing on the record
Yeah.
and wiping it off. And if I part of that is because I'm doing it twice as much now with my rinse.
Right.
So if I'm wasting time with surfactant and a rinse, and that rinse is doing as much damage as it is good, why am I doing it? I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I guess we'll see, and I can't wait to see some of the comments that we get on this too. Because there are some people that are well, we have talked about this in other surfactant talk. There are some people that is dead set against it, are dead set for it, and there's a certain way that you use it and a certain way you rinse it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this showdown, to see exactly how this turns out, and then see what the people that are on one side of the argument have to say about it. So I'm excited.
Also, is there a worse genre for records that you find all the time than old cruddy radio bloopers records?
Yes, and let me tread lightly when I say this. The old-timey religious records.
Hmm. Okay, they
Like
do clog things up pretty good, don't they?
like
Yeah.
if you go to any Goodwill, you're gonna find like and when I say old-timey religious, I mean like I can't think of any particular people off the top of my head, but you know exactly what I mean.
They have
Like
minor
it's
cultural value if they happen to be, say, a local church maybe, or a local high
right.
school or
That
something like that. But
right.
otherwise they're
Which
almost always in terrible shape. The covers are ruined. They're clogging up
oh
the
yeah,
bins. And
they're
yeah,
beat.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're beat up, and like I said, like you said, they do have a purpose, and if they're in good shape, people enjoy them, and that's fine. But like you said, it clog like, especially like I have one local Goodwill. You can go in there, and they might have 100 records, and 98 of them are going to be those type of records. and Lawrence Welk records. They have a bunch of Lawrence Welk too. So if anybody wants Lawrence Welk records, let me know. I can hook you up with them.
I think you'll find that's the case in a lot of thrift stores. There's nothing wrong with those records either. I like them, but you're right, they're often in terrible shape. So
oh yeah,
maybe it's because too many people have touched them. And I got a solution for you, Drac. So I am going to post a link into Twitch chat, or into our Discord chat, if I could figure out how to do it here real quick. Someone online came up with a solution to handling your records without having to touch them, using a common thing that you might find at, say, your local Menards or True Value Hardware or something of that nature. And I happen to have that object. So I went into my garage here and I found basically a glass suction cleaner. I have not tried this yet, but let's see if you can actually pick up a record using one of these things.
There is no way this is going to work. There is no way.
So, okay, I'm going to have to see could I do this on camera here. Let me back up my chair a smidge and do it that way.
I am stating for the record right now. I hope you don't mind dropping that record on the floor because that's about to crash.
Yeah, this thing's not going to do. Okay, I don't know if that's. Nope, that didn't do anything. Maybe it's the other way around. Okay. Nope, we got nothing.
Yeah, that's what I said. That is not gonna. No.
Nope. Okay, well, fail on the attempt then. So, okay, but the idea is you use these suction cups on either side of the label to... Oh, maybe that's the thing. Because the hole in the record, I need one on the other side to cause the suction.
Maybe. Yeah, if you would have two, you could... Okay.
Because I'm going to put in chat, this individual's... I'll clean up the image so it doesn't name the person. Before it goes out here, but you can take a look yourself at their solution to touching records was to use these on either side of them so that they could clean it without having to use any fingerprints.
Sir, you can grab a record with your fingers, sir. Just be very careful. You don't. No, folks, don't do that. Don't. No.
Experiment video, whatever number.
Somebody was looking for their 15 minutes of internet fame and failed with that. I'm sorry.
What's new, Drac?
Well, lots of stuff. I know we try to limit this to one record, so I was just like, I didn't know what to pick because I have been on a little bit of a buying spree, we'll say, maybe. So I have quite a few.
Is it tax return related?
Could be.
Yeah.
It might be. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm saving some of that for a trip I'm taking this summer too. But I was just like, you know what? There's some stuff, and I found a source for the unofficial vinyl that we talk about quite a bit on there. So I picked up quite a few unofficial releases here lately too that I found a really good source for that. But the one that I wanted to point out is one of my favorite bands. It's a brand new band. It's called Spiritbox. I've talked about them before. They have a new album out called Tsunami Sea. Just came out. And I realize we're only into the end of March, so we're just not very far into the year. But I'm going to make a bold prediction for myself, at least. Now, I don't know what all the critics are going to say or whatever. But this album that I'm about to show by Spiritbox is the album of the year for me. Hands down so far.
Excellent.
So it's gonna take a lot to beat this album, but this album, like I said, is called Tsunami Sea. I'll show you the vinyl at first. This is the web store exclusive cover. It's got liquid in it. I don't know if you could see that.
I saw that ahead of time. You shared that with me ahead of time, and I have to admit I don't know how I feel about that. I think I kind of don't like it.
I was going to bring that up. I am not storing it like this. There is no way I'm leaving this stored in here like this. I have it in here to show off right now, but yeah, because let me actually take this out of here.
Because at some point that's going to break.
Exactly. And that is the first thing I said. This is like gimmicky to all gimmick. I mean, it's cool looking, but the way they have this down in there, I don't know if that's showing up on camera or not, but that's gonna rip or break at some point. And this whatever this liquidy ink is gonna go everywhere. So yeah, I am not storing my vinyl in there like that. I'm
good for you. Good for you.
That.
Also, can I interrupt you quick? Can you put that back up? That's a PVC sleeve, is it not?
It is.
So on top of it leaking for that, you have to worry about PVC off-gassing, which is a real thing. I have seen it myself.
Yes. And that is another reason why I am not doing that. And that was the first thing when I first opened this package. I'm like, you did not use a PVC sleeve for this. But
well, I mean, they would because it's tougher, right? So it will hold up for a long time, but eventually it'll crack. It's pretty thick,
but yeah.
Yeah, eventually it's going to crack, and that stuff's going everywhere. So
100%. So yeah, I'm storing it like I always store it. This is staying separate, and then I'm gonna keep that. And then like if somebody comes over or whatever, and they're like show me a cool album cover, and I'm like, I gotcha. And
that's
then this
tough.
almost. Yeah, this almost could have went on the best looking records that we're gonna have later. This is the black splattered vinyl, which I thought was really super pretty.
Oh, it looks amazing. That really does look amazing, and I bet the album is really good too.
It is. Yeah. It is. Yeah, it's and like I said, they're a brand new band. That is their sophomore album. Their metalcore is if you want to get the genre that they're associated with. So check it out. Like I said, that right now. So far, it's going to take a lot to beat that as my album of the year, and I realize we're only in March, but yeah. But if you bought that from their website, don't store that in that liquid sleeve because that is bad news.
That pressing would cause me anxiety because of that outer. Because normally, and I had to do this myself for a record that I'm not featuring here, but I purchased in recent weeks because I had a PVC outer. I had to throw it away, even though it had a hype sticker on it, because I do not save PVC outers because they will, and they've off-gassed on at least one of my Residence records. I've got the proof.
I have.
But you can't throw that away because that's such an intrinsic part of the collector's part of the package. So that means forever now you're storing this bit of PVC with crap in it somewhere near your collection?
Yes. And then what I'm doing is my records are behind me. That is going to be stored in my office, which is down a hallway that way. It's going to be nowhere near my records. So when that thing breaks, it might get on my floor and probably stain my carpet, but I can live with stained carpet, not ruining a record. So yeah.
Maybe you should just throw it away then and be done with it. And just not worry about it. Be okay with the fact. If someone's like, does it have the outer water? It's like, it did, and I threw it away.
Yeah, it did. Because it was, I mean, okay. I'm like I said, I try to be positive on the show, but Spiritbox, if you happen to be watching our little podcast here, if you are, you guys are amazing. This is the greatest album you've ever put out, which is saying something because Eternal Blue was really good too. But why did you do that? Like that was. I'm assuming that was somebody at the record company's like, we need something cool for all these vinyl people, and this is the coolest thing we can come up with. But
is this a Spiritbox album to get if you don't know Spiritbox?
Yes. Awesome. I would say yes. It's a little easier to get into than Eternal Blue, which was the first album. It has more. Spiritbox does the thing with Courtney LaPlante is the lead singer, and she can go from singing, which she has an amazing singing voice, to to like the growl scream of metalcore, and she can do that interchangeably.
Nice.
It's amazing how she does it. And this album shows that off. Like there are some songs where she is singing and then all of a sudden she does that growl thing and then she goes right back into singing. So I would say this is more approachable than Eternal Blue. But I recommend them both. Like I said, they're like my top 5 bands of all time, and they're a new band, but they're just that good. But yeah.
Well, that's fantastic.
Tsunami Sea from Spirit Box.
Yeah.
Check it out. Just don't buy that weird.
Yeah. And you're right. Outside
cover.
of that outer, though, the record looks fantastic and the cover looks great and everything else looks good about it. So cool.
It does. And I may or may not own 3 other pressings of that too that look different.
Yeah, see, that's how you differ from me. I would, gosh, are you kidding me? I have 2 of one Beefheart record and I still feel bad about it. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's maybe a topic that I guess I can cover, and you can just tell me how dumb I am for owning like 5 of the same record just because the vinyl looks different. Guilty. Like I can name you 3 bands that I do that for. It's like, ooh, I gotta have that pressing. I gotta have that pressing. I gotta have that. Yeah.
Well, I have no idea what you're talking about with my What's New, which I am actually pleased to say is wonderful as well. And this is a new release of Testament's Practice What You Preach on, quote, orange bone swirl vinyl. My personal record doesn't seem to have a lot of swirl in it, but it looks cool. So,
yeah, it does look cool.
Yeah.
I
go ahead.
have to pick that up yet. I have not picked that up, and that's interesting. You say that about yours doesn't have a lot of swirl in it. Mm-hmm. I've noticed that because I've seen people like I've bought a release that's like a swirl release or something. And then I've seen people on YouTube show the records off, and I'm like, yours has way more swirl in it. I have like one little bit, or I have none.
Before I get to the positive, let me call out one other negative, and that is the printing, unfortunately, on this cover. Has got some banding issues on it. I actually have a record basement where I'm going to go into more specific detail on this pressing. And the reason for that is because I don't buy multiple records, but I'm certainly guilty of buying multiple versions of the same album. But as a result of that, it gave me an opportunity to compare the original mix release CD versus the remaster of this one for vinyl and compare the quality of the pressing to the original CD. But I'm not going to use this part of the show for that. Instead, that's going to get broken out into its own thing for those who care about that sort of thing. Let me give you the short version of the album itself, though. The pressing is fantastic. It sounds the best I have ever heard this album, and I love the sound of the album beforehand as well. And it's my favorite Testament album. It's so good.
Agreed.
And it's so good to have a new release of this on vinyl. So even kind of minor issues with the cover and such aside, it's wonderful. And the album sounds so good. The pressing sounds so excellent that I just have top marks for it. Top marks. So
that's on my list to buy, actually. So that's one I will be looking at getting. And that just came out too, right? Just like
just in recent weeks,
I think.
Yep, just got released.
That's what I thought.
I'll talk more about this album perhaps in a future show, but I love Testament, and it's the one that Like their earlier stuff, I think had some really cool creative ideas, and their later stuff is also really good. But I think Practice What You Preach is that point that they hit that I love the best, which was sort of the raw intensity of the earlier stuff, plus the developed skills as a band of the later stuff.
Right.
That apex is Practice What You Preach, in my opinion. And I loved the old sound of the album, and I like this new one even quite a bit better because they removed some of the 90s style kind of mastering that was prevalent at the time with like reverb and some of that kind of thing. So it just sounds clean. It sounds much cleaner, and it sounds great. What is the most alternative Slacker term? Is it radical?
Probably.
Is it
dude, radical?
I mean, you know, we live in a world where gender is part of the culture war, but still, if you go back to the old alternative days and such, dude is probably it, right?
Yeah. Dude, yeah.
What's funny about, quote, alternative is how the term itself has evolved over the years, kind of what it means and what it's ever meant, really. Unlike maybe classic rock and rock, which can fit into generally closer scrutiny, alternative spans a bunch of genres, bands, time periods, cultures, and really has usually, historically, I think, had as its main differentiator that it was not mainstream. But then alternative went mainstream. And so alternative became an actual radio-friendly, like defined AOR-style term for a certain genre of music that was being pumped to the masses in mass for quite a few number of years until other things sort of superseded it. Most normally, the lowering of kind of guitar-based rock stuff in favor of electronic and more dance and other kinds of genres. But so what is alternative is both mainstream and anti-mainstream at the same time in a way that I think makes not just defining what alternative is in general difficult, but particularly when it comes to bands, you have all sorts of crossover.
Oh, yeah. And then, like, we kind of, well, and we'll touch on this in another subject that we're going to cover in another episode too, but this is another one of those musical genres that have so many subcategories, because you have alternative rock, you have alternative pop, you have alternative dance, you have even like some people include like techno and like house music in the alternative genre. So it's just like, how do you lump all that into one thing and say, hey, this is alternative?
I also really struggled with knowing whether a more modern album that to me sounds like it could have been an alternative album back in the day counts, even though they don't count themselves, nor does Discogs as alternative. And so in that case, I was like, well, okay, I guess it's not alternative. But does that mean alternative is also defined by time?
It could be.
Is alternative, I mean, you could have modern alternative, but would it essentially be throwback 80s, 90s stuff?
Probably. But yeah, like there's, I wish I could think of the band. There's like a new band. We have a radio station that just actually, it was like a urban CHR / light rap station for the longest time. And they just flipped formats and now they call themselves the New Alternative. And they're playing they're leaning more towards like the classic alternative, but they're playing new stuff. And when they go to play it, they say, here's today's alternative. And then they play, and I wish I could think of a couple examples. And then that got me thinking, I'm like, okay, I can see this like back in the early 90s when like the like you were talking about like the alternative format on the radio. I could see this band standing toe to toe with these other quote unquote alternative bands. It fits. It sounds alternative. It sounds like that type of music. So I can see newer bands. I didn't have any on my list, but now that I think about it, there was probably one I could have included that would fall under that. they're not a quote unquote classic alternative band, but they fit in the alternative genre.
Alternative
If
began underground, clearly, and it was
right.
from the people in a very DIY way in many
Hmm.
cases, borrowing from punk and other things that were happening at the time, but
Yep.
they weren't necessarily punk, although would cross into alternative
Right.
plenty of
See,
times. But
then
it was
again,
also
right.
like new wave. There was that kind of darker 80s stuff that would kind of
Yep.
count as alternative. Um, I don't think it made
Which
either of our lists, but The Damned, for example, could well count as an alternative band, you know?
I almost had Bauhaus on my list. I was that close to including them.
So alternative
So
began entering the public conscience in large numbers really throughout the 80s and then hit the big time in the 90s. And
90,
then
yeah,
had kind of
90s
has
was the
scattered to the
heyday.
winds in the era of Napster
Yeah,
or whatever. So, but
yeah.
before we started with our top five alternative, then I had one other thing we should bring up, which is that we are separating out grunge and we're doing it for a
Yes.
reason. Your collection in particular is very heavy in this genre, and there
Yeah.
was no way you could pit all your grunge stuff against everything else and come up with a top
Right.
five list that made
Oh,
any kind of sense to you, really. So.
that would have been and I tried to at first, and then that's when I finally said, "Hey, let's separate grunge out of here because this is way too hard for me."
Mhm.
Because it basically my list would have been probably four grunge and one other album, probably if we wouldn't have separated it out. So yeah.
My number five is a classic. It's kind of an easy pick. It is The Breeders' Last Splash, one of the most famous, clearly kind of mainstream, commercial, successful alternative
Oh yeah.
albums, but it also purely fits into alternative. This is Kim Deal's breakout album after leaving the Pixies. They had released albums there was an album before as well, but this was really her first post Pixies project to blow up, and it's Kim Deal, and it's just a fun, really kind of alternative rock album that fits great in the summer and has excellent production as well, and really sounds like its own thing.
I'm just looking for a way around. It disappears this weekend. Further out of water. I'm just looking for the divine hammer. One divine hammer. One divine hammer.
And that was actually on my list, but I took it off because you included it. So yeah, that was like easily that like when we first were talking about show topics and we said alternative, I'm like, oh, Breeders, like I knew right away. I'm not sure where it would have fell on my list. Maybe five or four, probably. I mean, it wouldn't have been like one or two, but that is such a good album. Like Cannonball is such just like
Yeah.
a catchy song that and that's one of those earworms you hear that and
Yeah.
it's like it in your head for days.
I also feel it's an
Yeah.
album that annoys some people. I know some people who are kind of like, "Oh God, that album," But I love it
Yeah.
myself. I've always
Yeah.
liked it a
Oh
lot,
yeah.
and I think the production's really cool as well. It doesn't really sound like anything else in my collection outside of maybe Throwing Muses, which I don't have in here. But even then, they don't sound that much alike.
Well, I will talk about throwing muses in a way in a bit. Funny
Yeah.
you say that, but we'll get to that, and I think you know why I say that too. But my number five, and let me preference how I made my list. Back when I was in radio, I was working on a classic rock station. We were just a pure classic rock station, and then we sort of started to mix in a little like of the newer rock stuff too. Like we might have like during the day we would throw in like a little Collective Soul or something like that. That was still rocky, but then we would stick to like the classic rock. So I was playing that, and I was working at that station right about the time Nirvana Nevermind came out. I heard Nevermind, and I knew that it was going to blow up, and I knew we were going to have this whole. I mean, I didn't know it was going to be alternative and grunge, but I knew that was going to be the way of the future. I mean, it didn't last very long, but it was the way of the future for a while, like we said earlier. So I went to the station owner and I'm like, okay, look, let me have 4 hours on a Sunday night. Give me 8 to midnight on a Sunday night. Let me program and play all this new alternative music. And she like him-hawed around for, it took me almost a month to convince her, and she let me do it. So I started hosting this alternative show. It was called Austin's Alternative Airwaves because Austin was my on-air name and on the air. So I looked at this list, like the stuff I was playing on there and the stuff that kind of holds a special place to me just because of all the time I spent on the radio, all the time I spent talking to record companies, yada yada yada, because like I programmed that show. That was my baby. I did everything for it. I was also the music director for the radio station as well, so I had to talk to record companies anyway, but that got me in the door anyway. And then I'm like, hey, about this alternative stuff. So that's when I started getting, like, I knew, side note, I knew I made it when I went in the station on Monday morning and there was a case. And when I say case, I mean like it was like 150 to 100, something like that. A case of Offspring's album waiting for me. The record company sent me a case of CDs.
Wow,
and I'm like,
that's
okay.
Well, that never happened to
I
me.
made it.
That's cool. That's neat. What did you do with them? How do you get rid of a whole case of CDs?
Gave them away. I did.
Yeah.
I forgot exactly how I did it. But that is the time that I made it. Also, when I also got to meet Ministry too. That was also the time when I'm like, okay, I've made it. But anyway, long story short. Sorry, I hijacked the show there. But number 5 for me, Depeche Mode and Violator.
All I ever wanted, all I ever needed is here in my arms. Words are very unnecessary, they can only do harm.
This
Fantastic
is-
album. Fantastic album.
It is
So
good. This is, to me, this kind of is one of those albums when somebody says, tell me about alternative in the 90s, I'll go, listen to Depeche Mode, Violator. That'll tell you what alternative was. Is it dancey? Sure. Is it synthy? Sure. But did it fit with like what was on other pop? Like if you went to on your radio dial to like a classic hit station, like a pop station, and you heard Personal Jesus, did that sound like Britney Spears that they were playing? No, it didn't. It was totally different. And that's what I think made this album so good. So yeah, Depeche Mode and Violator.
I don't think they were playing Britney Spears when that album came out, but the equivalent of it.
Well,
So
yeah.
I know what you're talking
But
about.
I was trying to think of, I couldn't think at the top of my head.
Paula
like,
Abdul, although I like Paula Abdul.
Okay,
So
there you go. Yeah. Okay. That would have been a better example for it.
I think the chord in Straight Up is probably the most singular chord heard in pop history.
Oh yeah,
It's just one
Yeah.
chord. It's perfect. So
it is. That is, and that is another one of those. I know last week I kind of ruffled some feathers, especially with my friends that have sent me text about what I said Boston was the greatest debut album. I ruffled some feathers with that. This is another one. It's of course not their debut, but Violator is pretty darn close to a perfect album too.
I would agree with that.
They're-
That's easy. Yeah, for sure.
There might be one song on there that I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm not feeling this right now, but that is pretty close to a perfect record.
All right. My number 4 is a classic as well. A later classic from this band, however. This is Sonic Youth, one of the bands that really goes to the earliest days of alternative music.
Yep.
And this is, however, their 2001 era recording. And it also starts a trend in alternative music where the albums I like of bands fan groups tend to consider lesser albums. The amount of people who hate on Murray Street amongst the Sonic Youth cognoscenti or whatever is moderately high, and yet I think it's their
Really?
second best album of all time. I like Sonic Youth quite a bit, and I even had an opportunity to see them live. And I've been a fan of theirs since maybe about 1990 or so. My favorite album there is Experimental Jet Set Trash and No Star, another album that a lot of people who are Sonic Youth fans don't like. And my second favorite album is Murray Street, which I think is the best of Sonic Youth's experimental period because Jim O'Rourke was able to sit in, become a de facto member of the band, and bring their loose, long wanderings into focus in a way that concentrated that sound of that era for Sonic Youth into the perfect length with good songwriting, excellent production, and it's just the best album of that era of Sonic Youth and my second favorite Sonic Youth album.
That is a really good album. I own that on CD. I don't own it on vinyl, but I do have that on CD. That is one of the 2 Sonic Youth albums that I do own on CD, actually.
Speaking
That
of
one
radio
and Goo
promos,
was
I have
the
a
other
radio promo with that I got.
Do you?
Yeah,
Nice.
So
See, good pick. My number 4 going to be, and this is one I could have picked 3 albums from him, and I was like trying to okay, which one am I going to go with? And this one I kind of lean towards because I think it defines more of the alternative sound, and that is Matthew Sweet, and the album is 100% Fun.
How you move me, deconstruct me, and consume me. I'm all used up, I'm out of luck, I am starstruck by something in your eyes that is keeping my hope alive. But I'm sick of myself when I look at you. Something is beautiful and true. The world that's ugly and alive. It's hard to even want to try. I'm beginning to think, maybe you don't know.
He is just straight on pop rock. That's the best way to describe Matthew Sweet. He has another album that's called Girlfriend, which is really, really good. I almost put that on the list, but I decided to go with this one because this one is more, I think, approachable. I think Girlfriend is a little more. I don't want to use the term experimental, but it's a little more out there a little bit. This is more just pop rock, approachable, good alternative.
it's your
So, yeah,
list, but
check
I
it.
agree with your pick there on 100% Fun. I think it's an excellent album. And it's one of those, when I was hearing the clips of it for the production of the show, I was reminded, wow, that is a really good album. I had not really heard Matthew Sweet
It's-
since its time on the radio back in the day.
Mhm.
And at that time I was fairly critical. Not that I didn't like it, but I was really into way more underground stuff in that. So
Right.
the poppiness of it just was
Right.
like, okay. But when I
Yeah.
listened to it just recently in prep for the show, I was reminded that no, this songwriting is fantastic, and
He's
his
an excellent
voice,
songwriter.
his musicianship is incredible, and the production is out of this world. So
And
Yeah.
especially on that press too. This is the music on vinyl press. So I mean, music on vinyl does really good pressings, but that one is like the high end is like amazing on it, and the complete sound stage, and you can actually hear him. There's like a couple songs on there because I like listened to this whole thing when I was putting this list. I haven't listened to that album for a while. You can actually hear him pluck the guitar strings on a couple sections of some songs, and I'm like, that is amazing. So yeah, so Matthew Sweet, 100% fun. Check it out if you have it.
it's weird that I'm going to make this connection, but it makes sense in my head, which is that
Okay.
if you like Lemonheads, It's a Shame About Ray, but wish there was
Which
another album
almost
as,
made my list.
but wish there was another album as good as it, because Lemonheads sure didn't release it, then I maybe suggest Matthew Sweet's 100% in terms of sort of feeling enough in that space that could be your next It's a Shame About Ray.
I could see that. All right. I can see where you're going with that. Yeah.
It's a weird call,
okay.
but that's how I feel about it, I guess.
No, it is that. No, I mean, to me, that makes sense. But yeah, it's funny you say the Lemonheads because that was on my list for a while, and then I dropped it for something that's lower in my list then. But
If I had that one on vinyl, it might be close to my number one, except that I don't have it on vinyl, so sorry, Lemonheads. What I do have for my number 3 is an amazing album from a band called Junip. And this is one that a lot of people might not really have heard of.
I don't know what this is.
They're a Europe. Discogs doesn't consider them alternative. So speaking of our genre discussions here, I consider them alternative because it sounds alternative to me. They're technically world folk, except if this is folk music, then why are there distorted guitars, tripped out vocals, pretty
Right.
heavy electronic drums and other things that are going on? Plus, I saw Junip live, and I can fully attest to the fact that in my mind, they're an alternative band.
Wherever you look, it's always the same. So many people play the same game. Didn't imagine we would end up here. Now that it's faded, it all feels so clear. 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 It all feels so clear.
This is an incredible album, though, that does have sort of some acoustic roots that are then warped and sort of fuzzified through this kind of warm, inviting sound that Junip does. It reminds me, it's a perfect album for sitting by a fire in the middle of winter, maybe drinking hot chocolate or tea, but it's also just a really good kind of outdoorsy sounding album, even though it's largely electronic, and it's a really unique one in my collection, and I absolutely love it.
I'm gonna have to check that out because I've never heard of them. I'm not sure how they like escaped me.
No, that's not that surprising. I don't think they're that big a success, and they've only had a couple albums, and then their singer has gone solo since. So I don't know that it's all that much, but still, number 3, easy in my collection.
I'm interested to check that out though, because I was looking at your list and I'm like, okay, I know everybody else on your list, but I'm like, I no idea who this is. So I will check that out. And my number 3 is a callback to you when you said the Throwing Muses. There was a member of the Throwing Muses called Tanya Donley. She left the Throwing Muses to form her own band, and that band is called Belly. This is the album Star.
This old man I've talked about broke his own heart, poured it in the ground. Big red tree grew up and out, throws up its leaves, spins round and round. I know all this and more. So take your hat off, don't look talking to me and be there when I see the tree.
This again, when I think alternative, I think of this album right here. This was kind of in that heyday of when everybody was putting out like the pop rock. If you'll notice on my list, a lot of my list is, other than the Depeche Mode, a lot of my list is the pop rock kind of section of alternative. But this album just kind of defines that for me. I love her voice. I was a big Throwing Muses fan as well, so I just gravitated towards this. And then again, when I was doing my alternative show, I actually got to I didn't get to meet her in person, but I got to meet her on the phone. We had a interview. She was really fun to talk to, and she had some great stories. And this is just such a good album. So,
It is. It's an alternative classic for sure.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. And that I should have maybe put it a little higher in my list, but that is actually what I replaced the Lemonheads with, was the Belly, because the more I thought about it, I'm like, oh no, I gotta put Belly on this list. So yeah.
My number 2, I have to say this list was difficult to put together, and I went through probably 3 different iterations of what it should be.
Me too.
And ultimately, this one started not on the list, but then the more and more I thought about it, compared the pressing and listened to the album again, I was like, no. They Might Be Giants' Flood is absolutely one of the best alternative albums ever made. This pressing is
100%.
fantastic, and the songwriting of They Might Be Giants is just so out there, but family friendly, but also completely left us weird as heck.
They are
And
so
the-
quirky.
and
Yeah.
they're quirky, and they're super literate. You know, if you're a word nerd, you would love They Might Be Giants, and they're super fun. I've seen them in concert several times, including the best concert I've ever been to was them during
Oh,
the
wow.
Apollo
Okay.
18 tour at First Avenue in Minneapolis. It is there's a couple that are close, but none of them were more fun than seeing They Might Be Giants on the Apollo 18 tour at First Avenue back then. And this album is the one that came out before that really put them into the mainstream because of their cover of Istanbul, Not Constantinople. But then all the rest of the tracks on the album have had their own lives throughout radio and such through the days. And it's just a unique, fun, quirky, completely out there in a good way album.
Blue canary in the alley by the light switch. Who watches over you? Make a little birdhouse in your soul. Not to put too fine a point on it. Say I'm the only bee in your bonnet. Make a little birdhouse in your soul. I have a secret to tell from my electrical well. It's a simple message and I'm leaving out the whistles and bells.
And also one of the last ones that they did before they got a band. Although Apollo 18 also counts. But they eventually, instead of being a two-piece, got a full band, and their music changed a little bit as a result of that.
Yeah, that's a good pick, and that's one that would have been on my list. If, then again, I don't own that on vinyl. I do own it on CD. But yeah, that is such, and they're like one of those bands too. They're hard to define. Like, are they even alternative? Like, what are they exactly? It's like, they're like, and they're another one of those bands that they kind of change. Like album, they sound the same, but yet they don't sound the same. If that makes sense. Like from album to album, yeah, so good.
The reason I put them as alternative is because back in the day, that's what I remember them being in terms
Yep.
of the genre section
Oh, yeah.
at the local record store.
Oh yeah,
And just because they came up through college
And
radio and things like that.
They
so,
play, yeah.
Yeah.
And they were courted to me from the record company as alternative as well. That's what the record company, that album in particular, the record company said, "Hey, play this. We suggest this song as the single." It was "Birdhouse in Your Soul" was the one that they suggested, but I dug deep and I played some other stuff off of it. But
Before we move on, I'm sorry, before we
yeah.
move on, and I know that we
That's
don't
fine.
want to talk forever on this, but can I just say some of the lyrics, like for example, in Particle Man, are among the best lyrics ever made. There's also "Someone Keeps Moving My Chair" as a good example of like the humor of this album. "Whistling in the Dark," "Minimum Wage," yeah, and it just goes, the list goes on and on. It has its
Yeah.
own chorus opening as like a promotion for the fact that you're going to be listening to the album. It's so good, you know?
It is. So my number 2, there was another band called Camper Van Beethoven that was pretty big. They were big in like the college rock scene, college radio scene. They broke up, and some of the members went on to form the band that is at my number 2, and that is Cracker. The album is called Kerosene Hat.
Sometimes I wanna take you down. Sometimes I wanna get you low. Or brush your hair back from your eyes. Or take you down, let the river flow. Or sometimes I'm gonna walk the street behind a green sheet of glass. A million miles below their feet. A million miles, a million miles. I'll be with you, girl, like being low. Hey, 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 like being stoned.
Then again, rock, just that alternative, straight ahead rock. Little quirky at times. There's a couple songs on here that like kind of don't fit the album because the album is like rocky and poppy, and then all of a sudden they're doing pretty much a straight up country song, and you're just like, wait, what just happened? And then they go right back into the pop rock again, and then they're like back into like this weird, almost country, almost rock type thing. It's so quite the journey you go on with Cracker and Kerosene Hat.
It's a fantastic
checked this
album.
one out,
I don't
yes.
have it on vinyl nor CD, but it's a fantastic album. I'm a giant Camper Van Beethoven fan, and I think understanding Cracker really depends on your understanding of Camper Van Beethoven, because they did
Right.
a lot of that same thing. They were sort of theoretically kind of punk, except I wouldn't call them punk, and they were just as much willing to do
I
kind
could
of
see-
country and other things as anything
Yeah.
else. And
Oh, yeah,
they were,
there's-
they're great. I love that album a lot. So
It's jarring, but it's jarring in a good way though, because you're like, but it works. And
it's
the
this
way they
weird
mix
Southern
it,
California
Yeah.
country, though. That's the thing.
Yeah,
yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, and then but it's just like, because like I said, I was listening to these as I was making my list, and it's been a while since I listened to that. Very well worth the journey. So check it out.
My number 1 is a recent acquisition on vinyl, but a band and a series of albums that I have had in my collection since it debuted. It's among my favorite CDs, and it came out as a 2-album package on vinyl within recent years. It's Radiohead Kid Amnesia. And what they mean by that is it's the album Kid A and the album Amnesia, along with a third disc of outtakes and such from the session.
There was nothing to fear, nothing to doubt. Jumps into the river. Black-eyed angels swam with me.
And the reason it's that is because these two albums were essentially recorded as one album back in the day and then split into two releases. It's essentially one long studio session that was split across two albums. So they've put it back together on its own set and released it there. And I absolutely love this vinyl press, and I absolutely love these albums.
That is a great pick. Yeah, that I think would probably be one of my favorite Radiohead albums.
Yep.
It's a tough between Pablo Honey and that. I'm not sure which one I like more. They're two different albums, but they're two very, very good albums that kind of define, in my opinion, who Radiohead is.
It's interesting because Radiohead was never really normal in the traditional sense.
True.
But with OK Computer, they had a massive, almost Dark Side of the Moon style commercial success with their breakout album, OK Computer, right? And
Yep.
then following up on that, instead of going maybe more mainstream, they went very weird in the minds of a lot of people, and it had all these bleeps and bloops and electronic stuff going on in
Right.
Kid A, and people were like, what? But even then it was recognized as, wow, is this different? There is, and even to this day, I think it's possible that in 50 years this is going to be considered one of the more important musical statements of its era, both in terms of songwriting, kind of creativity, and how it intersected with culture and music and everything. Because it really is just a monumental creative effort that will stand the test of time just as well as maybe even like a Bach or a Beethoven.
Good pick. And that is one I've been trying to find that, but I can't find that anywhere. It's always sold out. And that is just in like, I've had a hard time finding it. I don't know, like maybe different parts of the country it's easier to get, but that is one that I would definitely love to have on vinyl for sure.
Since we are the Record Players podcast and it's my number one, let's take a second to look at the pressing, though, because I do have a few things that I could say about it. So the original album was mixed and mastered by the very famous Bob Ludwig, and this new version is by Nigel Godrich, who is also a very well-known record producer as well. It's half-speed mastered, and the thing is it's across 3 discs. The thing about Radiohead is they were always really meant to be a CD band in some ways. Their albums were too long for a traditional 2-disc vinyl. And yet, even though it's half-speed mastered, they put all of Kid A on 1 disc. How did they do that, you might ask? Well, they did that by, look how tiny that center label is. And how into the center, compared to a regular record, it goes. Now, it's still close, so it's not, they didn't go too crazy with it, but the answer is Kid A sounds fantastic, but there is an audible difference in sort of dynamic range because of the compression that they had to do with the grooves of the record to fit it onto one disc. And I know this because I have the original CD that I can compare it to. And when I pop
Right.
the vinyl in versus the CD, they both sound great. And in some ways, the vinyl sounds quote unquote better because of the detail that's brought in with the remaster and the, all that sort of thing. But the sonic range, the dynamics in particular, are slightly superior on the CD compared to the vinyl. Just flat out. It sounds great. But if you're caring about dynamics and sonic range, the CD is the mix to listen to, in my opinion. That is not the
Interesting.
case with Amnesia. Amnesia is my favorite Radiohead album, and there is no problems whatsoever with Amnesia in terms of the recording and the mastering of that disc. And the bonuses sound great too. It sounds the best I've ever heard it, with one
Right.
other exception. What is with warping on new records? Both records.
Yeah,
and
tell
you'll
me.
see this on the video during the clip that I played. You will see that needle going like this on that thing. And this is a brand new sealed vinyl that I got.
Yep. No.
What in how's that going to impact things over time? What?
I just recently took a newer release back that I bought from I'll just say a big box store. I know. I bought a record at a big box store. I'm not a real record collector. I apologize. That's another argument we can talk about at a future episode. But I got it home and it was warped so bad it wouldn't play. So I took it back, and luckily the new one I got wasn't like that. But yeah, it's like warping is a big problem.
Yeah, it's really disappointing because
Yeah.
in some ways this is the audiophile version of the album to get
Right.
on vinyl, except it's got a little bit of a warp in it. Now, it's not distorting the
Yeah.
sound that I could hear, but what's it going to do in 10 years? Is that warp going to get worse?
See,
So-
yeah, you see, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I'm not sure if you have a warp, if it does get worse.
If it doesn't,
it would
then I'm
probably
good.
depend.
It plays just
It probably
fine.
depends on how you store it too. But I mean, we
Mhm.
take care of our records, so it should be okay.
Yeah.
So,
Otherwise, it's a
good
great
pick,
package.
though.
It is a great package. And I don't think the issue with Kid A's dynamics necessarily make it a bad release or anything like that, but it is something to be aware of, that if you really are going for that audiophile version, I don't know that I feel the vinyl of this is superior to the CD. Other than the fact that the remaster is superior to the old master because it's brought in additional detail and things like that. So.
Yeah. Great pick for your number one. My number one. Got a question for you. Do you like jazzy type music?
I do.
Do you like horns?
I do.
Do you like acoustic guitar?
Yeah, in general.
In general, then you're going to love my number one. It's by a band called Cake. The album's called Fashion Nugget.
To me, coming from you, friend is a four-letter word, and is the only part of the word that I heard. Call me morbid or absurd, but to me, coming from you, friend is a four-letter word.
There's really no way to describe this because it's all the above that I just said. There is horns on this. There is like jazzy swing type sections of this. There is like acoustic guitar. There is singer-songwriter a little bit on this. This is one of those bands. They fit right in the alternative category because you can't really describe them. Like, what are they exactly? And they're another band where they stayed the same, but yet each album they changed just a little bit, but yet they still sounded like Cake. You could still tell you were listening to Cake. I debated with myself a lot on which album to put on, but I think this one defines them as a band as a whole, and it's a little more approachable than their other ones. I have their other ones on vinyl too, but yes, Fashion Nugget by Cake. And another little fun fact with Cake. Cake, I can say, is the only band in the world I have been bowling with.
Ooh.
That is my claim to fame. As a radio station, we brought them in for a show, and I asked them, I said, hey, you guys are going to be in town like 8 hours before your show. Is there anything you want to do? And they're like, do you have a bowling lane there? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, can we go bowling? And I'm like, let me see what I can do for you. So I got to bowl with Cake.
Well, how cool is that?
That's my claim to fame. So yeah, there you go. So yeah, my number one, Cake. I love that band so much.
If you know Cake, you know it from the single Going the Distance. Did I get that title right? Okay, God.
Yep.
I hope I got that title right. Because I haven't really heard that album since it came out, and but I love the album, and I love that song, and I agree, it's an excellent number one pick, and it's also a very fun album, and it really is an album that has its own sound as well.
They also, a lot of people might know from their cover, they did a cover of Gloria Gaynor's "I Will Survive."
And that's on there too. Yeah,
that's on that album too. And then most people, I bet a lot of people listening to the show right now are saying, I don't know who Cake is, but if you ever watched TV in the 90s, you know who Cake is. They did the theme song for the series Chuck. So if you ever watched Chuck, you know who Cake is. The other album that I really like from them, but is a little more out there, is called Prolonging the Magic. It's a little more out there. So don't be afraid to check it out. But approachable wise, if you've never heard Cake, I say start with Fashion Nugget and then work your way back in the catalog, because earlier stuff is a little more out there.
I completely agree with you on that recommendation. That's the album to get from theirs. And I would also say that if we ever do a top 10 motivational songs, like let's say you need to get into a boxing match and you're going back after 10 years of retirement and you need a soundtrack, Going the Distance makes that top 10 from that album.
Oh yeah, easily.
So, yeah.
Easily, yeah.
Alternative was such a big part of my life, and it's weird that in some ways it's a smaller part of my collection these days. I have a bunch of stuff on CD that's alternative in that, but my vinyl collection.
Yeah, me too.
But even I was buying records when I was listening to alternative music, but I was buying not alternative music on vinyl.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of the same way. If you look at my Discogs, I have quite a few stuff that could be considered alternative, but it's not a big selection for me. But I have the heavy hitters, I would say, but there is some stuff that I'm like, a lot of people are like, if you look at my Discogs, they're like, I can't believe you don't have insert band here. And it's like, vinyl's expensive. I can't own everything.
I live in a state where it's so legal you could just sit in a chair on your front lawn and do bong rips. That's where we've come as a society. It's sort of wild, when you think of some of these old albums and people getting busted for things and all that. And it's like, I live in a state where you can just go to there's like a half dozen stores within minutes of my house, and I could just sit there and,
Isn't that crazy to think about though? Like, yeah, just like think about like just 10 years ago, it probably wasn't. I'm not sure when it was legal there. Well, my state, it's still not legal, but like all around me, it is. Every other state around me, it is.
This episode is going to fall across April 20th, otherwise known as 420. And it's for a reason that we're going to be doing our top 3 most high albums. These are not the albums that are like, hey, if you are a high, you should listen to them. Although in many cases, that will probably be an accurate description. But this is the albums themselves are probably super high, and the musicians who recorded them were probably super high when they recorded the following albums. And we're doing this special episode in honor of 420 Day here, in tribute for the Record Players Podcast. Also because record jackets have been used to sort weed for how many decades now?
This is true.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, have you ever bought a used record and had like seeds or something in it before?
No.
I've never had that happen to me, but I have heard of people that have.
Yeah, I have heard that
Especially-
too. I have heard that too.
Especially if
Yeah.
if you get like some 60s and 70s presses and stuff. People have said they have found seeds or other like papers or something, but no, I have never had it happen to me personally. But I just wondered. My number 3, I don't really have to describe it at all. Name of the band is called Bongzilla, and it's called Weedconsin. All you need to know.
Weedsconsin is such a good name
Weedsconsin.
for an album. I just
Yep.
absolutely love that name.
And
Yeah.
the pressing, of course, like fits the motif, as it were. It's psychedelic. It's almost death metal. And the only reason why I have this, I was in a record store. I'm like flipping through at this record store in the not new releases, but the why am I drawing a blank? The recently added section of this record store, right? Flipping through, I see this cover and I'm like, that is amazing. And then I see the name of the band and it's like $10 and I'm like, I'm buying this
Oh, heck yeah. Heck yeah.
for $10. I don't care if this thing sucks. This is just like for $10, this is coming home with me.
I love
But yeah.
that album. I didn't hear it until we were doing prep for the show, and then I was just like, wow, what a great album. I bet that would be a fun concert to go to as well. So,
Oh, I bet.
so you've got a modern album. We're going to go way back to the 1960s on this one. And this is really an album that pretty much defines the era. It's the band called The Zodiac, and the name of the album is Cosmic Sounds. The Zodiac isn't really a real band, however. They're a bunch of studio musicians who got into a studio and proceeded to make very psychedelic songs that match this album cover about the various parts of astrology. So all the different, Scorpios and Libras and Pisces and Leos, each song is themed about one of them and has a narrator explaining what people are who are these things in a very, very groovy way.
Taurus, broad-shouldered bearer of hope, strong, steady, silent motion. As patient as space.
Yeah, I was not familiar with this until I saw your list, and then I checked that album out, and I was just like, okay, I don't know what I'm listening to right now, but
I should have put the
some-
disclaimer in before rather than after the clip, most likely. But I will warn you, this album is in bad shape. And it's because it is actually a fairly rare album, if you're going to get it in good condition. And this was just a cheapie that's all beat up. But it so
Right.
clearly made this list that I just
Oh,
wanted
yeah.
to include it. But it's going to
yeah.
hurt an audiophile's ears to hear my audio rip of this one.
So Led Zeppelin, right? And Bob Marley. What would happen if you would put those two together?
They would definitely
then-
smoke weed.
But then, not just that. Then you get somebody that sings like Elvis and dresses like Elvis. You would get my number 2, which is by a band called Dread Zeppelin.
What gonna say, what gonna do? What gonna say, what gonna do? Let me tell you about the girl I love. What now she looks so fine. She's the only one I'm thinking of. Maybe someday she will be all mine. One tell her that I love her so, and I'm through with your every touch. One tell her she's the only one I really love.
I don't know how to describe this, but the lead singer looks and sings like Elvis. Then it's reggae, but they're doing classic Led Zeppelin songs. I don't know how to describe this other than that, which I'm sure if you were partaking at the time, it would make more sense to you.
I've known about Dred Zeppelin for quite some time, and the thing that always strikes me about it is it's weird how well it works.
I know, that's what's bizarre. Like, then again, that is another one I picked up. I was just flipping through at a record store and it was cheap, and I'm like, okay, I'll give this a shot. Got it home, cleaned it, listened to it, and I'm like, this actually does work. Like, all these songs work very well reggae style. Like, it's like all of them work well. Like Houses of the Holy in particular, if you have never heard the Dred Zeppelin version of Houses of the Holy, do yourself a favor and listen to that. It's pretty remarkable.
Pretty remarkable is what you could call my number 2, which is Dr. John, the Night Tripper, Gree Gree. Now, the thing about Dr. John is he is one of the most famous musicians of the 70s for Right Place, Wrong Time.
Right, yep.
Monster hit that changed his career. But before he was the pop hit guru, he was Dr. John the Night Tripper for this one album, which is super far out and really about kind of New Orleans drenched sort of voodoo is, I think, the best way to describe it.
Ain't afraid of no tomcat. Fill my brains with poison. Walk through the fire. Fly through the smoke. See my enemy at the end of their road. Walk on pins and needles. See what they can do. Walk on gilded splinters with the king of the Zulu. Dang, I'm at a come on, make you come on. Walk on gilded splinters.
I knew who Dr. John was, but I wasn't familiar with that particular one until this list, and then I was like exploring it a little bit, and I'm just like, okay.
It's such a departure to have to see him do that to go to what his mainstream was, but clearly that wasn't a big commercial success for him. So the opportunity to get into the record industry, whatever, and make these big hits was what he did instead. But it's just so funny that he's got that early origin. I actually really like the album, although I also think it's very much an artifact of its time. But I really enjoy the album too. I think it's super unique.
My number 1 is going to be a band. They are kind of thrown into that groove rock. They're hard to describe. They're kind of all over the place. They're one of my favorite bands. It's a band that's called Clutch. They are genre defining because they kind of do their own thing. And they're another one of those bands like I talked about on our alternative list. They kind of change from album to album, but yet they say the same. You can tell it's Clutch.
A king is born. Dodge swinger. Jesus on the dashboard, oh yeah. Whenever it feels right. Whenever it feels right. Whenever it feels right.
Tell me there was not some things that were done before they wrote and recorded that song. But yeah, this is just good sludge groove. Just you like put this on, you go for a trip. Once you listen to the song that I ripped out this album, you'll go on a trip and you'll see why I say that.
My number one is also actually probably one of my top 20 favorite records, and that is Lee Perry. This is before he became Lee Scratch Perry. Lee Perry, Kung Fu Meets the Dragon. This is one of those that I bought simply because of the album cover, and of course I
That
did.
is an
I mean,
I would
of
have bought
course
that
I
too,
did,
just by
right?
the cover. Well, of course you did. I would be
Yeah.
disappointed if you would not have bought that.
Yeah, but turns out it was also a really far out, super duper high, but also really good version of mid 70s Jamaican dub music. And it's one of Lee Perry's best albums, I think. And it's a fantastic sounding album, too. I absolutely love this album, but there is no question whatsoever that there was a whole bunch of stuff going on when they were recording this album. So,
We know how that album was made, and
Yep.
that's I think all of
it
our
wasn't
lists
clean
so far
living.
today.
It wasn't clean living. I actually wanted to start this off by asking whether you think colored vinyl sucks or whether it's actually a good thing.
I don't necessarily seek it out, but I'm not one of those anti-colored vinyl people. I do know some collectors dead set against it, say it sounds like crap, it sounds horrible. The only instance I will say that I will buy it, but I won't be happy about it if it's the only way that you can get it. Do you have any glow in the dark vinyl?
No, at least I don't think so.
I have several, and they sound like garbage. Every one of them sounds horrible. I don't know what it is about it, but to me, I can take a black version, a standard black version of an album, and then take a colored version, and I don't hear a difference. So, but I don't necessarily seek it out. It's just so prevalent anymore, or prevalent, that, like you almost, especially if you shop like at a local record store, chances are you're going to get a colored because they do special indie versions of the record. You might get a choice to get a black, but anymore, you're probably going to get a colored. So I don't really seek it, unless it's something like, like that Spirit box I showed earlier.
They
That
look
one
stunning. I
bought-
love the look of colored
Yeah.
records. I think they look great. That said, and we're about ready to get into our best looking records. That's why we're bringing this up. But that said, I think that a lot of the crackles and pops and that and the colored vinyl I hear is because it's colored vinyl. I don't think it's that colored vinyl is inherently more noisy, but I think there is a wider variance in materials used to make colored
Okay.
vinyl that seems to
see
give you
that.
a better chance to get not the greatest mix, whereas I think whatever compound is used for black vinyl, and I recognize there are probably half a dozen compounds actually used,
Yeah.
but whatever that compound is for traditional black vinyl, I think stays relatively similar, whereas there's enough variance in the color that occasionally it comes through on an album that frankly kind of sounds like junk. And that bothers
See,
me a lot. So
I have the opposite of that. I guess I've got lucky and I've gotten good pressings of everything. I like other than the glow in the dark, I haven't had any color that I can just say this sounds horrible. Thankfully. So, but I've watched other YouTube videos and other people talking about it. So apparently maybe it's just my ears and I don't perceive
No,
that.
you know, and I agree in general too. Some of my best sounding records that we heard and the best sounding records were also colored vinyl. So clearly it's not just whether it's colored or not. But I just think that there's sometimes, especially when you get a little weird with it, you can hear a difference. And sometimes they're getting closer to picture disc in terms of their outcome than a traditional pressing, where it's like it's meant to look at more than listen to. So
Yeah.
So these are
one of
records
them
to look at.
On my list would be that way. Yeah.
These are records to look at, but also records to listen to.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to go through our top three. I'm going to start with one that, speaking of what I just described, on the surface looks like a totally normal record. What in the world makes this one of my best looking records? It looks like a plain black record, does it not? But the thing about Power Salad's vaudeville is it is a very unique record that was put together by someone who clearly cares a lot about records and wants to meet specific outcomes. And let me explain.
Okay.
There are several things that make this record different from any other record in my collection. Number one, it has no bead on its lip. It is flat record on the way in. A little history on that. That used to be how all records were. And then eventually, in the 1950s at some point, with the creation of automatic record changers, they started adding that little bead on the lip of records so that the automatic record changes record needle would slide into the groove, and so that the records, when stacked upon each other, would be less damaged, because the grooves of the records would have that slight offset by the bead. Well, let me ask you, Drac, do you stack your records raw on top of each other these days?
Heck no.
All right.
That gives me hives just thinking about doing that.
When you put a needle on a turntable, are you used to hearing a little popping sound?
Usually, yes. I mean, there's a slight.
That sound is caused by the mechanism of the bead on the front of the record. Now, this person who made this record was like, I need to stop that. So they went and made a flat record, which means, of course, that if your auto tracking is off or something, you might need to, in fact, physically move the record to catch the start of the groove, because it doesn't do it automatically. The second thing that's different is the inside of the record has what's called a run-out trap. Do you know what a run-out trap is? Have you ever had a record get to the end and start scraping up against the label, making awful sounds through your speakers? A trapped groove will prevent that. It's basically after the last track, it just goes in a loop on a regular inner part of the plastic groove, which is silent, so that you don't have any end of the record sound. This person is enough of a vinyl nerd audiophile that they were like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to remove the sound from the start of the record and the sound from the end of the record. And then the third thing that I would point out, you'll notice that there are no track breaks. Maybe it's hard to see in this light, but this is one long continuous track.
Can sort of see it there, yeah.
There's variances in the vinyl because of the natural way record grooves display, but it's one long track, and the reason for that is this is one of 40 records that was hand pressed using one of a small number of currently existing individual record presses. So basically, they crank them out one at a time, like in Europe, using basically a hand individual press. They start the master, they press direct to the record. And there was a group of 40 of those that got made, and I've got number 40 of it that happens to be signed by the band. But all that stuff together, the weird run-out groove, the weird opening, the hand press nature of it makes it clearly one of my coolest records.
Well, yeah. That's crazy.
The music itself is a little bit something that you might hear on, I guess, a Dr. Demento or something like that. A little bit of kind of, it takes a vaudeville approach of being a variety show in terms of style, everything from death metal to country. And the clip I'm going to include is a really fun clip where they do a version of Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Oh, nice, nice. I can't
Felt
wait to hear that.
appropriate for this episode.
Indeed, yes, very much so. All right, my number 3. I'm going to admit I'm cheating. I'm cheating on this number 3 because this is a Zoetrope album. If you're familiar with what that is, it's the Nightmare Before Christmas soundtrack. It's the Zoetrope version. Let me actually get these out of here so I can show this off. It's gonna look weird just to, like, look at them, but once you actually see it on the turntable, you'll understand. But there's what it does is when it's moving, when it's playing, it will kind of like if you remember as a kid, you would draw stick figures in like the corner of like a piece of paper,
A flip
like
book,
a notebook,
Yeah.
and then you would flip through, and then it would look like they were animating. That's what this does.
The same basic
on the
process of film, like original film strips as well, where you have individual images at, 30 frames a second or whatever, and you get a motion picture, otherwise known as a movie, right? So
I tried to show you when I was showing my clip, and I actually have to get the other off my turntable because I forgot to grab it off. I apologize. I couldn't figure out where the other record was, but here's the other record. But you can see, let me try to get close. But you can see So I admit this one's kind of, and this, like you said earlier, this is almost verging onto the picture disc territory.
Well, it doesn't.
Kinda,
I've heard that album, and it sounded pretty good to me.
It does, and I was surprised. I have like a colored version of it, and then I have this because I wanted this because I just thought that was amazing. And then it I don't know if it's just because I have such bad eyesight. It's hard for me to see that zoetrope effect. And I've read a lot of people have that problem. Some people see it, some people don't. I tried to catch it on video. I don't know how well that I did on that, but hopefully you can see it. But then I've watched other like people on YouTube, and I can see it really good on their videos. I don't know what they're doing, but
I can actually maybe explain it. And you know what I just said about film strips, how they would do individual frames of film, 30 frames a second, and that would create a motion picture. The same thing is required. So use your cell phone camera at cell phone, either video set at 30 frames a second, or just the photography mode usually does it if it's set to like UHD. Play with the settings. You need a frame rate of 30 frames a second. And then you're looking through it on like your camera there, and then you'll see the animation go of it. But you can't generally with the naked eye because you don't have that shutter effect going with your own eyeball, right? So
but no, that's just one of the coolest looking records I have, I think.
Boys and girls of every age, would you like to see something strange?
Come with us and you will see. This our town of Halloween. This is Halloween. This is Halloween. Pumpkins scream in the dead of night. This is Halloween. Everybody make a scene. Trick or treat. Tell the neighbors gonna die of fright.
My number 2 is a record that I had to get rid of its original outer jacket for because, again, it was a PVC outer, sent almost like a picture disc, and all that's really left then is the album itself and this, which is clearly classic, by someone named Jimmy Carl Black. And Jimmy Carl Black used to play for the Mothers of Invention back in the day with Frank Zappa, and this is a much later period record that I think he did for Friends and Fans. And the reason I'm including it is you can see it has a very weird edge.
Oh, yeah, it does.
This is an 11-inch record with basically a 10-inch with this weird little outer lip here. And it rather than trimmed off at the end, it's just presumably the squished vinyl without it being trimmed off at the very end. The music itself is really kind of covers of 60s standards and things like that. I think at this point, I don't really know the history of this record other than I saw it and I was like, that is so weird looking. And I'm a big Zappa fan, so I was like, well, heck yeah, I'm buying Jimmy Carl Black's.
Well,
there's a thing in here saying it's like limited edition to 500 copies or something like that from 1981.
Okay.
So I assume this thing has some collector's value to it.
I would think so.
I would also just point out that the track I selected for episode 5 here is an old cover of a song that is called Cherry Pie.
Give me some. Give me some. Give me some of your cherry pie. Oh, oh.
Ah, see, tying it back to the hair metal episode. I love it. Nice. So my number 2, then again, this is going to be, some people are going to say this is just a colored version of a record. Who cares? I just think this is amazing. It's by a band, which I'm sure a lot of people have probably never heard of. It's by a band called Entombed, and the album is called Wolverine Blues, which I don't know how they got away with that, actually, without getting sued, but somehow they managed to do it. They're a death metal band, I don't know if anybody has ever heard of them, but this is a recent press, and it's on this black and red, kind of almost like tiger type. I just think this is, and when this is like spinning on the turntable, it looks just so cool to see this spinning, but
What you believe is the vanity you conceive. What you love you don't pan. To put it against is to put to an end. And never on the passion. Life's fucking lost. You will never gain my trust.
there you go. Entombed.
That is
I
so
figured-
good. That is so good.
I figured you, of all people, have probably heard of Entombed before. I would assume
I
so,
have. I
yeah.
remember them a little bit, but I
Yeah.
couldn't tell you much about them other than I remember they were
Yeah.
sort of a heavier metal band.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, they're very heavy. They have like that death metal
Yeah.
growl vocal and very, very heavy sludgy guitars. But yeah, that's just, I just saw that colored pressing and I'm like, okay, that's cool. Plus I remember that album when it came out and I've always liked that album. So
I did the same thing for my number 1 because ultimately I have a bunch of color splatter vinyls of various shapes and forms, and I was like, well, it looks really cool, and which one is better than others? And I was like, I don't know. In some ways, it led to my initial
right.
discussion of I don't know that I actually care that much about colored vinyl, and for the most part, I
Right.
don't even really look at it. And if I do, it's often like, I guess it's okay. However, this record is probably my favorite of all my color vinyls, and it's this clear with splatter sort of on it. And the reason I really like it is because of the way it spins on the turntable itself, because I think it just looks cool having those little blobs spinning around on the turntable, and the little circles in the ring itself kind of almost have a weird trance-like effect just because of the color gradient on it and that. So if you're looking at a singular point, it just looks really weird. This is the Hohokum soundtrack. Hohokum is a video game, a very kind of casual, puzzly sort of open world game where you play as that little thing there, and you're just sort of wandering around this fantasy universe, really just moving around and listening to chill music, and that's really the game. it's sort of an experimental indie game, and it's got a really cool
Okay.
cool soundtrack.
And my number one, we talked about it in an earlier episode. I don't even remember why I showed it, but I'm really going to talk about it now. It's Pearl Jam. It's the Dark Matter, but it's the limited edition Record Store Day, ghostly. Like, this is just, hands down, this is the coolest looking vinyl that I own.
Ever since
just
I
look
saw
at
it
that.
on your original debut of the show here, I've been like, that's the coolest looking vinyl I've ever seen.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it's got the center label is even awesome, but yeah, see, look at that. That's just, I'm sorry, that's just awesome.
yeah, that is
There you go.
truly amazing looking.
So yeah, that I think hands down. I mean, I have some pretty cool looking like pressings like this, like colored pressings, but I think hands down, this to me, like when we talked about doing this, I'm like, number one right here. Like I had to think about my 2 and 3. I didn't have to think about this number one. So yeah. And like I said, this is the Record Store Day. This was limited to like, I want to say 1,500 pressings, 2,000. I'll have to look to make sure I'm right on that, but I know it was limited.
From what I can gather, the album was really good too.
It is. It's right up there with one of my favorite Pearl Jam albums. It's probably my second favorite Pearl Jam album easily.
Is it their newest?
It is. Yep.
So their newest
this-
is really one of their best.
It is. Yep. And then again, Pearl Jam is like one of those bands that you go back and you listen. Like if you sit down and you listen to the full Pearl Jam catalog back to back, you're gonna see the growth and the change in the band. Like this Dark Matter sounds nothing like what 10 sounds like. Like 10 in Versus, pretty much the same. Vitology, they started changing, and then by the time they get to Yield, and then Gigatron, they're starting to grow. You can see them grow as a band.
Yeah.
So yeah. So if you're going into it thinking, oh, I want to hear Pearl Jam at their grungiest, at their their 10, I want to hear 10 Part 2. That's not going to be Dark Matter for you.
To the light from my eyes, in the blood from my heart, when all is dark matter.
They're a much more mature, grown band on that. But amazing album, amazing pressing.
Sweet.
Easily my number one.
I realized when putting together this list that the thing I have the most of is something that would purport to be, quote, blood-splattered red. I have no
I have a
fewer
lot of
than
that too, yep.
3 blood-splattered red vinyl records that are listed as like
I
promo
have-
hype
yep.
stickers on it.
Yep.
Yeah. Of all the colors, that's the one that I've got
yep.
the same of as it were. Other than black.
I have a lot of blood splattered, and then I have a lot of like swirl something, like black and orange swirl or cream swirl, or yeah.
What's
A
funny
lot of
too is
swirls,
none
too.
of those 3, none of the 3 blood splattered are that great. I don't
Yeah,
think
and
they're
that's-
actually. Why do they keep trying
Mine-
it? It doesn't work.
Mine too. I haven't seen one either that I'm like, okay, that's cool. I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, it's kind of gimmicky, but I kind of see where you're going. But okay.
Another one I actually almost put on my list was a John Carpenter, which is largely just a black record, but it's got these little streaks of dark blue in it. And then, so like when you just look at it
okay.
on the webcam, you'll be like, it's mostly black, isn't it? But when you see it on the
Right.
turntable, it's got like this slight refinement to it that just makes it super classy. But
That's-
ultimately, it just didn't stand out enough. None of the colors, except for the one I picked, really stood out enough to me to make the list.
And I almost included on my list was the version of the Police Synchronicity that I have. I have one of the translucent ones. If you hold it up to the light, you can see completely through it. When you're looking at it just with your eyes, it looks like black. but if you hold it up to the light, it's completely see-through.
It's cool.
It's
cool.
I don't know how they did it, but it's it was like there's only there's a limited number of pressings of those. There's like Synchronicity has like a gabillion different pressings of it, and there was some that were that translucent, and then the others, the only difference between the album is they changed the colors on the album cover. And I'm like, really? But then again, there's some people that collect every one of those.
Yeah.
Not me, but yeah.
Well, okay, so ultimately then, what is your favorite color record?
I think anything red type, because red is my favorite color. And I really like it like that Entombed. I really like it when they do like a black and a red together somehow. I just think that, let me grab this Entombed out again. I just think black and red look so good together, especially on the vinyl. But I think anything red.
I'm going to go with orange. I'm going to go with orange myself. I like a good orange record. So
I have some orange red records that look pretty cool too. But yeah, I think definitely red. Like you give me a red pressing. If I had my choice between a black and a standard black pressing and a red pressing, probably going to go with that red one over the black.
Really? I might go for the black. I think I would actually go for the black record. Yeah.
I kind of figured from what you had said earlier, I figured that was going to be the case. See, I would probably go for the red. Static on records. That's like the killer, right? Like we all hate static on our records.
Hate it.
So what's the best way to get rid of static off your records?
Anti-static gun.
That's a fair point. I have one of those. I use one of them. Or you can be super cool and you can do a machine that does it for you.
Humming Guru Orbit.
Yep, it's called the Humming Guru Orbit. And don't look at the price on this. This is stupidly expensive price. I had a gift certificate that I blew. I probably should have bought something else, but
maybe if it works. I guess we'll find out if it works.
So yeah, I will shoot a video of this because this is hard to explain.
Okay, so I mean, it looks a little weird from the box, but what's weird about it? What is it like? What is it? What do you do?
I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera, but this goes onto your spindle. So you put this on your spindle. Well, here, you know what? Kill a moment, and I will just move my web camera up there and show you.
But you have to put it on top of a record, a plastic piece that moves and has a motor in it. You're putting on top of your record. You're
putting it on top of your record.
Like a Hot Wheels or something, like ring around the
track.
Yeah.
Sort of, yes. There we go.
Yeah,
so
that
this
works.
Sets right on top like that.
Okay.
And I will shoot a better video of this.
Uh-huh.
And then on the top is an on-off.
Okay. Cool. What?
And then if you hear it, it's like ionizing. It's got like an ionizer in it.
Okay.
And you can actually feel like air coming off of it. And it's going to go around that. And it is literally taking the static off of that record. And it does work because I played a record that had a bunch of static on it.
What? Huh.
Yeah. Isn't that the craziest thing that you have probably ever seen?
I mean, I don't know if I love it or hate it. I really don't know if I love it or hate it. I can't.
And I'm in the same boat. I don't know either. My problem with it is it takes way too long. It's like a 2-minute process.
Of course it is. You got to justify the cost.
To like do this, but I mean, it does work though.
Okay.
It might be super gimmicky, but it does work.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason it shouldn't, as long as the basic science behind it is the same as you'd see like in an anti-static gun or
it's
something like that.
And
right?
it's basically an anti-static gun, but it's just like automatic anti-static gun.
And it's just going to have a nice motor with a general kind of computer control, and that's probably what the fan's about, is to keep it cool and regulated and such.
And then, like I said, you can feel the air coming off of it, and see, now it's done.
And you're
now,
definitely
in
going to
theory-
get a more consistent result than you would get just doing the trigger method across 3 points or 4 points or whatever.
And
so
now
the science
in theory,
is sound.
Yeah. In theory, that record now has no static on it.
But still, it kind of feels like you're just putting some kind of weird little Roomba on top of each vinyl record before you play it. So I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, it's gimmicky, sure. But I think that's the weirdest piece of, like, also by Humming Guru, which is the people, they're the ones that make the record cleaner that I have, the ultrasonic record cleaner. They also make an ultrasonic needle cleaner.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. So which side is the side with the little cup in it's the one that you're going to put the cleaner in, right?
Yes.
And then basically dip the stylus in and then turn it on.
Yep.
And in theory, nothing is going to touch that stylus at a vibrational strength. It's only going to be the liquid that vibrates.
Correct. Yep. The liquid vibrates enough, and that's what ultrasonically gets all of the stuff out of the stylus in theory. Let me see if this is charged. I don't know if this is, and then, no, it's not charged enough.
And so you just put it up on your record player platter and do it there?
Yep. And then it also has a weight too. And this side is a stylus weight, but
Yeah, for tracking and things like that. Yeah.
That's, so you're tracking for us. But those are the two. Humming Guru does a lot of weird, they're like a Hong Kong company that does a lot of this weird, like, gimmicky,
I have to admit, part of why I love record player stuff is because of how much crazy nonsense has been released over the years in its name. So, you know.
And then
but Humming Guru is for real. I mean, all this stuff is legit and it's going to work.
Oh, yeah. And
like
I said, the Humming Guru ultrasonic cleaner, I can vouch that it works because I have cleaned some really nasty, dirty records that I have bought in like record stores or like Goodwills or, secondhand shops that were nasty, dirty. And I put them through the ultrasonic and they have cleaned up to where they look like a brand new record.
You could question whether the money is worth it, but I don't think you can question the science at this point. You can hear the difference on those ultrasonic cleaned records. So,
and like I said, the only reason why I have any of the stuff is because I had some gift cards, and other than spending that money on these gift cards on worthwhile things, I bought this weird vinyl tech stuff.
So speaking of not unnecessary things whatsoever for me to own, I happen to have a 12 cassette tape player and recorder machine that I found at a flea market back in the day. And this is a Concord F120. Turns out it's actually quite rare. But what this is a rebranded version of, I think it was Philips, maybe something like that. I think it was Philips also did this. But what these were is really for retail establishments or museums or venues, bars, things like that, where they could load in a whole bunch of cassettes and it would just automatically play, pop them out, move over to the next one, pop it in, play it, and do that. And then, but here's the trick about the Concord F120. Not only is it weigh about 20 some pounds, it also only plays one side at a time. So at the end of this,
it doesn't automatically flip them?
Yeah, at the end, it's only one-sided playback. So at the end, they'll come over here, you flip the tapes, and it'll go back the other way and do it that way. But it's such a weird device that I couldn't help myself and pick it up. It functions in that you can put in cassettes and it'll play them, but I've been having a problem where it'll eat some cassettes, so I think there's some kind of issue with the head alignment or something like that. And to be honest, I'm just never going to use this thing enough that I'm going to pull it apart to try to fix that head tape issue. It's a display piece. It is, however, a really interesting, weird piece of tech that is just part of the periphery of all the strange audio garbage that's been released over the years. And nowadays, this would be a USB stick, right? So.
Oh yeah, exactly. Does that have like a external or internal speaker on it? So it'll, or do you have to hook it up?
You have to hook it up. It does, however,
Okay.
have a microphone input as well that you can do for PA style announcements while the music's playing. So if
Right.
you want to tell your shoppers about the latest deals while you've got some lovely elevator music in the background, you're set. So.
The blue light special in aisle 12.
The other thing, though, that is also it was used for is to some extent journalism and clerking, because it's record and it has independent audio channels for left and right, so you can determine
Okay, all
input
right.
gain, and it'll record one tape after the other. So if you needed 12 times 45 minutes of audio, it would be a way that you could do it as well.
Okay, that thing is pretty sweet.
It is. It's also
See-
so heavy. Oh my gosh, I can't lift it anymore.
I bet it is. I mean, that's a chunky boy from what, the 60s probably?
70s,
Early
I
70s?
think, yeah, it's something like
Okay.
early 70s. I don't really know. I actually have put out some calls on the forums. I went to like Audio Karma and that asking, hey, anyone know about this thing? And so I did get some information about it being a rebranded, I believe it was either Philips or Norelco. I can't remember which of the two
Okay.
companies now, that this is essentially a rebadged version of that. But that kind of thing was being released all over the place in the 60s and 70s. You'll see it in the catalogs of automatic playing cassette tapes and things like that.
Right. Okay, that's pretty cool though.
We don't have cool tech anymore. It's all digital. That's the problem with our digital future. We have to go back and have weird looking well, you know what though? There's weird looking record players these days.
There are.
I saw something with
There are.
lights on it. I saw Pink Floyd did some Dark Side of the Moon dealio.
Yep.
Bob Marley had his
just-
bamboo table. We could do. We don't own them. At least I don't own them. But
Yeah, no,
we could do a
no.
weird record player topic someday.
Just about to bring up if you've seen the Dark Side of the Moon table.
I kind of want.
And then Metallica has one too. Look up the Metallica table and talk about a weird looking player. But I do want that Dark Side of the Moon. But that's like a $3,000 turntable. But
yeah, it's
it's
stupid.
cool.
Is it?
But
is
it's
it? But it
cool.
is. It is. It is though. That's the problem. It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, would I play a record on it? Maybe. But it's cool. Not
Just don't play a Roger Waters album on it. It'll just reject
Exactly,
that
that's
shit.
right.
So
That's right.
yeah.
That's right. Oh.
Yeah.
Nope. Instantly breaks if you put Roger Waters on there. It's like, no.
You've been listening to episode 5 of the Record Players Podcast. Thank you so much for watching, listening, however you're getting this short form on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, long form on Facebook and YouTube. We love it if you give us a like, a follow, a subscribe. Love it if you have any comments. Let us know about what's on your mind here in the comments section here. So our next one, I think we're going to be delving into, in the near future, into some speed metal. We're going to tackle grunge. We're going to do a few, I think, best ofs of collections that are perhaps a little on the one-sided side, where you've got enough albums or I've got enough albums. We're going to mix in a little bit of CDs. We might even get more into CDs here at some point in the near future. And we've got a full list of topics. So thanks for joining us. We'll all talk to you all again soon.